Hi, I'm Nikki Lowe and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Ask most working mums, and juggling work with a sick child can be hard, particularly if you're the default parent or the flex point in your family. You've got a busy day of work ahead, you've got client meetings booked in, or you need to be at that important meeting and your child is ill. What do you do? For most of us, it's a tear your hair out type of situation. The stress, the pressure, the guilt and the anxiety can all build. This podcast episode launches as we approach the autumn and winter months, when typically our children are more prone to catching bugs and germs. So today's guest is here to help us be proactive in boosting our children's immune systems. I learned early in my motherhood journey the importance of my child's immune system. You probably heard me say my son was born with a hole in his heart, and at just a few weeks old, he was classed as failing to thrive, a term I hate and a term I can't quite say without my own heart breaking a little. Luckily, I believe the NHS don't use that term anymore. So I made it my mission to understand how to help him to thrive. And during that journey, I was supported by the incredible team at Embracing Nutrition. You may have heard me talk about them and how vital they've been to my and my family's health back in episode 15 of this podcast. What they've done to empower me with the knowledge to proactively boost my and my family's health has literally been life-changing. And I asked them to join me on this episode to share these insights with you too. All parents should be armed with this information, in my opinion. So if you find this episode useful, please share it with family and friends. Today, we're joined by Lottie Strutt from Embracing Nutrition. Lottie is a physiotherapist and a nutritional therapist specialising in children's health and autoimmunity. She studied at the College of Naturopathic Medicine, CNM, and has a fellowship in ADHD and nutritional therapy. And Lottie is currently studying to specialise in dyslexia and nutritional therapy, and also genomics, which is about how the body's genetics interact with the environment and how we can best support ourselves to be at our best in this world. Lottie has personally supported me with my daughter's health, so I can, personally vouch for her and how amazing she is. I know you're going to gain so much from this conversation. You're probably going to want to have a pen and notebook at the ready to make notes. I found it really fascinating to hear about how Lottie came to do the work that she does and why she's so passionate about it after her own health journey. She shares with us some really powerful insights into what we can practically do as parents. I particularly liked where she shares her own kind of journey in motherhood, about it's made her pay attention more to what she puts into her children, on her children and around her children. So I think you're really going to want to listen to that. And hopefully you feel more empowered after this episode on what you can do to support your children. So I can't wait to dive in. Let's welcome Lottie. So welcome, Lottie. Thank you for joining me on the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show.
My pleasure.
And obviously, I have had the pleasure of working with you and your team, and I know how amazing you are. But for people that may not have come across you and your work, can you just describe what you do and also give us the backstory? Like, how did you come to do this?
So it's an interesting one. So I'm a nutritional therapist, but I'm functionally trained. So there's the term functional medicine, which is more to do with, so yes, we always work with food, but we're very much looking at the whys behind illnesses. So the functional medicine side is saying, okay, but why do we have the symptoms that we have, and what can we do about it more naturally than just trying to find a pill for an ill? And I got here because I needed a functional medicine practitioner. So I was quite unwell. I've got an autoimmune disease called CVID, which means that I'm immunocompromised. So I was getting really poorly, hence this is an interesting conversation for us from an immune system perspective. So I was getting constantly ill, always needing antibiotics, and I had very little energy, and I was just being basically managed by the NHS quite poorly. Not their fault, but they just don't know what to do with people other than here's the medication that we suggest, and other than that, we don't know what to do. Which wasn't really working for me. It was okay in that that's all they have. but I needed more. And I was trying to work as a children's physio as well. So I was getting constantly sneezed on and snotted on. And I absolutely adore my children, but I don't adore their snot. And I would get everything within 24 hours. So I needed to boost my immune system, support myself in order to get my job fulfilled so that I could keep working, keep living, and keep feeling as good as I could. So I saw a functional medicine practitioner, changed my world. I became well. And I obviously haven't changed my diagnosis, but I have created a body which can then manage in the days of snots and colds and viruses, and even had COVID and didn't really even know I'd had it. And it has changed the way that I live. So functional medicine, nutritional therapy is ingrained in me and who I am, because I know it and I feel it and I've lived it. And I understand why people need something else other than just the medical model.
Oh, wow. And I didn't know that about you. So that is absolutely fascinating. So it's not just the job that you do, it's you've lived and breathed that journey. So your autoimmune diagnosis, had you had it all of your life but only got diagnosed as an adult, or was it something that came on as an adult?
So it came, I think I'd had it for a long time, but again, I'd gone backs and forwards to GP, as I hear so many of my clients saying, I'm not well, I'm absolutely exhausted, please, there's got to be something wrong, this can't just be normal. So I think I'd probably had it from my 20s, because again, even as a physio student, I was being injected with vaccines to try to get immunity to hepatitis, because I need to have it to be working on the wards. And I could not make their titer work, so I did not create an antibody towards it. And in the end, they gave me something like 6 vaccines and then just said, oh, I don't know, we're giving up with you. Just go onto the wards anyway and work. And I was thinking, well, this isn't right, because everyone else is making titers, but nobody ever asked why. And this is why my favorite question in functional medicine is, yeah, but why? Why wasn't I making titers? Why was I getting poorly, more poorly than anyone else? Why was I feeling the way that I was? So finally, I managed to see a rheumatologist on the medical NHS, and who amazingly just did some blood tests, really simple blood tests, IgGs, IgG, IgA, IgM, and I was missing all of them, and sent me to an immunologist who you just get the diagnosis to say you don't have an immune system effectively, or IgGs are low, and the way to manage it is I have to inject Ig therapy from other people. So other people give blood, they spin it apart, and then I get the IgGs to inject into myself, which is amazing. So big up the people who donate blood. And so, yeah, I think, again, this is why I work with autoimmunity, because I've also got celiac disease. And I feel my story, and this is everyone's really different, but my story for CVID, I feel, was I was undiagnosed celiac disease in my childhood, ate gluten, it bombarded the immune system can't work properly. And I found research papers on this. The immune system effectively switches off and says, I can't deal with that product that's making your immune system go haywire, so I'll deactivate myself, and then created this ability to have CVID. So obviously everyone's very different in that they have triggers. Their genes have the potential to turn on an autoimmune disease, but something's got to trigger it. So this is where I love working with autoimmunity, because I, again, have lived this story to say I wasn't born with this. I was born with the potential for it. And I created that perfect storm, whether it's your genes interacting with, whether it's stress or toxins or illness, virus, something made that trigger. So I would say in my 20s, something made that trigger. And we all know what 20s happens, isn't it? Like, go to university, you don't eat very well, you get stressed, you don't sleep very well. There you go.
Oh, I love that. So that has kind of fueled your passion to almost be forensic with kind of immune systems. That would make absolute sense. And you also specialise in kind of children's immunity as well. What's fueled that? Is that your background as a child physiotherapist?
Yes. So I have always wanted to work with children since I was 10. Where I was looking after children and babysitting them and going to creche and I would volunteer aged 11 in a special school. I've always wanted to work with children with special needs. So going into physiotherapy was really about, I really want to work with special needs children and get them being their very best self. So as a physio, you're working with the physical needs of children. So how can I get you stronger? How can I get you walking? How can I get your walking better? How can I get you in less pain? Can I get you sitting better in your wheelchair? And then I started working with autism. And I was looking at these autistic children and thinking, I can help you because I can provide the sensory input that you need to feel calm and to feel grounded so that you can concentrate, so that I can get you living your best self. But there must be more. So again, I went down this road of thinking, I was working with premature babies as well. So again, I watched this journey through very prem babies turning into wonderful little human beings, but their start in life has been very different. So whether it's autism at a later date, and I'm saying, is there more that I can do for your gut, which is the thing that makes your neurotransmitters, which helps you to feel calm? Or if I'm looking at a premature baby who's had a really difficult start in life and they've had antibiotics and they've come out of the womb at 24 weeks. And again, it's nutritional therapy, functional medicine, and physiotherapy, which allow you to provide this amazing building block of what can I do for your internal, which is your gut, your microbiome, your neurotransmitter, what does your brain need, what does your nutrition status need, and what does your physical self need as well, and you can put it all together.
Love that. So it's almost like the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. Now, my next question, you've already started to kind of allude to some of this, is obviously we're talking about children's immune system. Can you share what we mean by that? Because you've already talked about microbiome, you've already talked about neurotransmitters. So can you kind of share actually, what we mean by immune system and what are the components that make it up that we might be exploring today?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, generally 60 to 70% of your immune system, what we think of as either fighting something we want it to fight or trying to understand whether we should or shouldn't fight ourselves, comes from our gut and our microbiome. So the good bacteria in our gut should be the place that creates a lot of our immune system where we are fighting properly. What we are finding more and more is that our immune system is not necessarily regulated the way it should. So what we're trying to get back into is saying, is our immune system how it should be back in caveman era, where we came across a virus? To be fair, viruses and bacteria were very different back then, but we came across something that our immune system had to attack, but it had to assess it first and say, you are a friend, I don't need to attack you, you're a food particle. You are a foe, you're a virus, I do need to attack you, I need to get you surrounded and engulfed, and I'm going to gobble you up, and then you're not going to attack me and cause problems for the body. So that's the immune system then going, I'm understanding you, your friend, I don't understand you, I don't want you in here, I'm going to get rid of you. Or nowadays, what we're seeing more is that the immune system is getting very confused and saying, actually, you are, for example, the thyroid gland, I'm going to attack you. But actually, it's mistaken itself and it's gotten confused and it's starting to attack your own tissue instead of attacking something that it should. So that's where the autoimmunity side comes in.
Brilliant. And so in kind of my childhood, we used to think of, or I was kind of led to believe that your immune system was like your white blood cells. But also you've talked about here the microbiome, about bacteria. We've got good and bad bacteria that kind of predominantly sits in our gut. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And that has a job as well. Could you just at a high level talk about how perhaps microbiome and white blood cells and how they work together?
They are slightly different in that you go, we're wanting the white blood cells to be at the ability to fight. So that's a slightly different way that I don't necessarily work specifically with white blood cells, red cells and macrophages, etc., because that's what's going on almost like underneath at a blood level.
Yeah.
Versus the way we get our immune system primed for what goes into us for it to assess. Because if we think about it, the only place really that the external environment comes into contact with us internally is through our gut. No other, unless we obviously cut ourselves and we're open to the elements, no other part of us really comes across something from the outside other than the gut. So that's generally where the functional medicine, nutritional therapy side of it will always focus is get the gut working. And obviously, if someone does have a lymphocyte ratio that's out, it's still telling me there's something wrong from a virus or an infection or something is in you that we do need to support and get rid of, and we can work on viruses. But they are almost like, you'll get those bloods done by the GP. I'll have a look at them to be able to say, that's interesting, that's part of the puzzle, but I won't work on it specifically per se. I'm working on the other direction, which is more getting the gut immune system into a better place.
Brilliant. That makes absolute sense. So thank you. And what are you seeing at the moment kind of over the last few years, or kind of in this generation, around children's immune systems? What might somebody come to you with that you might work with them on?
So there's two different things when we're talking about this podcast and ideas. There's two different areas where I see, which we can cover. One is more, oh my goodness, my child will, I just keep getting coughs and colds and snots and chest infections and eye infections and sinus problems and ear infections, and they're being just driven mad by poly's. Particularly actually post-COVID, honestly, because we've had a lot of what we call COVID babies, which are, they were in lockdown and their immune systems were not primed appropriately. So they didn't come across lots of different people who held them. They didn't get passed around lots of family members. They didn't get bugs. And then their immune system struggled as a result. So that's one of the arms, which is our immune systems need to be primed. We are born, in theory, via the vaginal canal. We get coated in good bacteria from our mamas. We then create our immune system from that. So we're seeing quite a change in, either if someone's a C-section baby, we'll see a change in their microbiome, and can be that I see a little bit of a pattern, and the research does suggest if you're a C-section baby, you are more likely to have atopy or coughs and colds or immune system or allergies because you didn't have that immune system priming response. So again, lots of things we can always work on this. And I always say this is not a mum guilt thing. If a kiddo's coming out through the sunroof and they needed a C-section for safe reasons, I will happily say it is so much more important to get a child out safely and well, and then we work on the rest of it, which we always can.
Which is what you and your team have done for me and my children, because both my children were C-section, one emergency, one planned. And at the time, I didn't understand this, but you've educated me and worked with me to kind of help, as you say, prime my children's immune systems in the right direction, which has been fantastic.
Yeah. And then so the next sort of phase on from that priming is actually we do need our children to get a couple of coughs and colds and bugs, and they need to be able to come across them, hear that they're a foe, fight it, and then yes, they'll maybe get a high temperature, but it'll go, and their body copes with it. If you don't come across those things, it's actually quite difficult for your immune system to know how to then fight the things that they are coming across. So then I've had several, which are probably the children are around about 3-ish now, and they're going to nursery and they are getting everything, and they're getting everything really quite badly. Then they get virus that turns into bacteria. The bacteria then turns into, I need antibiotics, which again, if you need antibiotics, you need antibiotics. It's incredibly important to make sure if you need them, you need them. But we then need to be educated around how can we then help your microbiome, because the antibiotics might have disrupted how the good bacteria is thriving.
And would you mind sharing a bit more on that? Because I think some people listening will absolutely get that, but for some people that might be new news, because I think in the UK, we're not educated on that. I think other European countries, I know one of the mums at school, she's Polish, and whenever in Poland they give out antibiotics, they also then give out a pre or probiotic. You might need to tell me. Yeah.
That sounds good. Okay. Yes, absolutely. So the way that antibiotics work, if you've got a bacteria, so if you have a virus, for example, you get a cough, fine, we should be able to fight it. Sometimes that virus can turn into a bacteria, say in your lungs, and you'll get a chest infection, which if a doctor then hears that and says, do you know what, yes, you are getting an infection, you're struggling to fight it, here's some antibiotics. The antibiotics are hopefully going to kill off that bacteria, but obviously you take them orally, meaning they do go through your gut. Now, because your gut is made up of bacteria, it means that the antibiotics also can kill off the bacteria, yes, in your lungs, but also, yes, in your gut. Now, we should have lots and lots and lots of good bacteria, more good bacteria in your gut than there are people on the planet. So there's a lot in there. They should be all friendly and holding hands and doing really good jobs of things like your immune system. So again, let's go back to that 70% of your immune system comes from the good bacteria in your gut. But if your antibiotics has gone through your gut and wiped out quite a lot of your good bacteria in the gut, it then means you could have a secondary impact on saying, well, if my good bacteria in the gut made my immune system work really well, but I've just wiped out the bacteria, you're going to have an immune system which is going to struggle longer term to then create an immune system response which is appropriate. So there's loads of research which says you're actually more likely to have even things like anxiety and depression post-antibiotics, because again, the good bacteria make your neurotransmitters, which are things that talk to your brain and tell your brain how to feel. Or people are more likely to get another infection if they've had antibiotics because their immune system is not necessarily then in tip-top shape.
And what you've said is so important there. And if people didn't catch it about the neurotransmitters, because am I right in saying now the research shows there's more neurotransmitters in our gut than there is in our brain? And we think of like the brain just being in our head, and it's actually far more systemic than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that phrase, what does your gut say, or what's your gut feeling? The gut is almost your first brain and your brain's the second brain, because the gut is the place that makes the things that talk to your brain. So if we didn't have the good connectors, it's almost like, the postmen that are sending out the letters to the brain for your brain to then be able to say, this is how I'm meant to feel. And I can, working with a lot of ADHD and autism and neurodivergent behavior, I very rarely look at the brain per se. I might say you need some fish oils for your brain, but I will always look at your gut to say, what's your gut telling your brain?
Brilliant. And it's interesting because my journey with your organisation and you and your team, a lot of my health issues that you've worked with me on for the last 10 years, and I would not be in the position I am with my health without you guys, came from when I was 11 and I started my periods. I had really bad acne, and what was being presented was polycystic ovaries, but they didn't diagnose it. What they did do was gave me long-term antibiotics, tetracycline, for I want to say, years. And, I did what I was told, took them. And then, decades later, the knock-on impact of that on my system was pretty brutal. And we've been forensically going back to, okay, so what do we need to do to get me, I've got non-specific autoimmune system problems. And and you can kind of trace it all back to that. So I think
I have a lot of teenagers on my caseload who have had the concept of like Roaccutane or an antibiotic for acne, and have ended up with a lot of mental health troubles as a result of it.
Yeah, so this absolutely fascinates me. So we've talked about kind of the picture of what is our immune system, what are some of the things that we're experiencing, particularly post-COVID. So as parents, what can we be doing to support our children's immune system?
So there's lots that we can be doing. And I always say this right at the start, which is everyone's really different. So when we're talking like this, it's quite generic. And then if you want to know more and be more specific towards your child or your family, then obviously come see us, because we can do more specific info gathering. But what we can do generally is always, it's not for me to say I want to stop your child getting poorly, because I actually don't. There's even research to say even things like chickenpox, if you don't have chickenpox, you actually could be more at risk of things like cancer, because it's doing something important for your immune system and priming you, so that you can then get an immune system that's more active and looking for cells. So I don't want to stop your child getting poorly, but what I do want to make sure is that they can fight. So we want to get there in the early phases of, there's a sniffle, someone said there's something going around at nursery. What can we do to almost prevent the spiraling cascade of getting really poorly and not being able to kick it? I also really want to support mama and dad's health and siblings' health, because again, when you've got a whole household full of poorlies, it's really, really rather unpleasant. And if I can look after mama and dad and whoever's else looking after those kids, you're going to have someone who can help fight for the child. So I'm all about prevention. It's what can we do to make sure that we've got a child who is nutritionally status is high, so that they've got all the good nutrients they need to make sure their immune system works nicely. But also having things like your emergency first aid kit in the cupboard, which is, if they're getting poorly, what can I do? So first steps, I would say, honestly, what can we do is looking at food. Food is always going to be first line, because that's what's going to contain your nutrients, which is going to keep you in the place that you want to be in long term. And that's especially difficult with children, honestly, because they're quite fussy and they're very I don't want to eat this and I don't want to eat that. Honestly, the things they don't want to eat are the things we really want them to eat. So this is where the trickies come in. And it's how do we get in things like zinc-rich foods? Zinc is really important for your immune system. Zinc comes in things like oysters. Well, that's not really going to happen, is it? Zinc comes in things like pumpkin seeds. And if we can go, fair enough, my child won't necessarily nibble on pumpkin seeds, but we could put them into a smoothie, for example. Or vitamin C rich foods, which again we know is quite important for your immune system. They come to things like strawberries and berries and oranges and orange food. So how can we get those into our children? So first steps, I'd say, get yourself a rainbow diet chart, and there's a rainbow pretty, picture on the fridge, and you can each have one, and it's all like, have I eaten something purple today? Have I eaten something green today? Have I eaten something orange today? Because if you can get your child looking at their plate of food, and instead of going, oh, yuck, broccoli, we get them going, oh, green, and oh, yellow, oh, I haven't eaten something orange today, I'm going to go grab a carrot, then it's a different thought process than just, you must eat your greens.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that. And a couple of things it's making me think, I think, again, you've educated me on, is it, we should be having, we talk about, we should have our 5 a day. Actually, that's not accurate really. So what, is it 30 different types of fruit and veg across a week?
It's quite a lot. And do you know, the reason they said, oh, we'll just say 5 or we'll just say 10 is because it's actually something like 30 a day for you to be able to have. And if you said that and the government made that as a pledge, you just wouldn't get people doing it. Versus if you say 5, we might get 5. So ideally what we're aiming for a couple of different reasons, is the colour of the food. When you look at food and you see that's red, that's orange, that's yellow, that's purple, that's green, they all contain antioxidants and different nutrients. So you're going to be getting an antioxidant, means antioxidation, which is effectively anti-inflammation. So you're going to be supporting your immune system, and you're going to be supporting any inflammation, and you're going to help yourself to fight if you've got those different colours in you. So that's why we need all the different colours. And then those different colours turn into, like you said, varieties. And the other thing that's amazing with the variety, when you say like 30 over the week or 10 a day or 30 a day, honestly, it's however many you can get into your system is what you need. But what we're trying to do is, again, your gut microbiome, so the good bacteria, gobbles up all the different types of fibre that are in the different colours of the food that you eat. So again, if your child only ever eats sweet corn and broccoli, for example, it's still only 2. Even if you eat it twice, like on Monday you had sweet corn and broccoli, and on Tuesday you had sweet corn and broccoli, it's still only 2 varieties.
And again, that's really educated me, because I would say that I was aware that, eating fruit and veg was great. But if I go to the supermarket or do my online food shop, I tend to buy the same ones each time. I wasn't getting the variety.
So the variety is the thing that you allow your good gut bacteria to thrive, because they all eat something different effectively. So with kids, I don't know whether you've seen, I get these pop up on my Facebook adverts, I swear it's going to talk about it, but there's these little videos of hamsters or guinea pigs or rabbits, and like they're getting laid out a lettuce platter, and it's got all different types of...
I've not seen these. The algorithm's working for you, definitely.
But all these little guinea pigs they're all going to different parts of the salad platter, whether it's like the carrot, the broccoli, they're all eating something different. And so I tell these, and this sometimes it works with kids and sometimes kids get freaked out, but so go with your child. But if you think about your bacteria in your gut, every different bacteria is like a different guinea pig, and it wants to eat something different. So that little guinea pig that wanted the carrot is going to be different to the guinea pig that wanted the lettuce. And they're all going on different, trying to find different things. And I'm saying you need to try and think through, I need to feed my guinea pigs in my tummy different foods, different colours, different exciting things. And for mums and dads or whoever's doing the shopping, try and just go, I'm going to put one new thing on a plate once a week, and see if you can interest your kids, see if you can eat it. And again, whatever you as a parent are eating, your children are going to watch. So if you're trying to feed your children broccoli and carrots and spinach and kale, and you're eating a burger and a bun, they're not going to be wanting that. Versus if you go, actually, we're all going to try it. Let's do a taste test. What do you think? Is it better done like this? Is it better done like that? How do we all like it? We'll rate it. What colour is it? What does it smell like? It's much more of an explorative play thing, rather than just shovel in the food and don't think about it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I know Jo, your colleague, talks about, like, I remember her telling me it's almost like you're planting a garden, and if you just planted the same plants, it might look beautiful for a little while, but when those plants die off, you've got nothing else. So you want to seed all these different, and that's what you're doing to your kind of gut microbiome, is seeding a beautiful garden that's going to kind of have all these different things at different times of the year, and that variety.
Yeah, and things like you talked about a little while back, the prebiotic versus a probiotic.
Yes, yeah.
Prebiotic, like on that thought process, if you think about your gut like a flower bed, the prebiotic's almost like the soil that you're lining the flower bed with. And then the probiotic's going to help the bacteria or the flowers to thrive. So if, again, that fibre and the colour of food that you're putting in, it's helping you to have a flower bed that's not just sort of, concrete and nothing's going to grow. It's the soil, it's the fertiliser, it's the seeds, it's the flowers, it's the food, it's everything that goes into a flower bed to make it grow.
Because I still get mixed up between pre and probiotics. So what are the foods that fit into those two different categories? Because there's like fermented foods.
Which are probiotics.
Okay.
So the fermented foods have got bacteria in them. So again, if you can get your child onto any kind of probiotic food, so if you think like kefir, kefir has got bacteria in it, which when you just, all you have to do is put it on your porridge or your cereal or put it into your yogurt. And again, you only need a small-ish amount, a couple of tablespoons in the morning. You're going to be supporting the bacteria going into your gut. And if your child likes things like sauerkraut, that's amazing. And if they don't, that's fine. But as parents or as adults, we can be eating sauerkraut for sure. And any expectant mother, again, it's like, think about the probiotics that you can put into your gut to make your gut then into a better place for your future child who's going to be coming out of you.
Yeah.
But more like the prebiotics they're quite difficult to get into children, honestly, because they're things like Jerusalem artichokes, which are known for a different word. Like, they do create quite a lot of wind. So there are different types of prebiotic food. Honestly, the best way of putting prebiotics in is getting like a powder form and just putting it into a smoothie, and then you are done, and your child will not even know that it's in there because it doesn't taste of anything if you do it in powder form.
Which is what I've done with you, with my children. There was something I was going to say then, and it's just gone from my mind around. So we were talking about, yes. And in terms of getting these kind of 30 different, or the highest amount of variety that we can get, what are your tips for that? Because obviously you're experienced in working specifically with children. You've talked about smoothies, and kind of what are some other tips like that we can perhaps hide or encourage our children to be getting that variety?
One thing I always say is, yes, we can hide, do hide. Also, don't hide. So I always put on my child's plate, who is at 18 months, is quite picky. And I've gone through a phase of she won't eat anything to she's now finally putting things into her mouth. And I'll take it as a win, even if she picks it up and looks at it, it's a win. If she picks it up and puts it into her mouth, even if it comes back out again, it's a win. So you have to be really aware of going, yes, I want to hide these nutrients so that you do get them in, but I also want you to see and touch and smell and feel what these are. And I always say I'll put one safe food on her plate that I know she will eat and she's very happy with, and I'll always put a new or a different or a slightly unsafe food that she's not familiar with. Because if you never put it on their plate, because you just think they're never going to eat it, they never do. It's a waste. I do appreciate it's a bit of a waste, but they will never look at it, smell it, touch it, be anywhere close to wanting it. Versus you'll often find if you repeat it over and over again and it just sits on their plate and you never say, go on, just try a bit, go on, just do it, just try it, just because that becomes quite a negative loop, and you will often find that a child will say no, almost on principle to say no, versus it's just there. And my question more would be, what's it feel like? Is it squishy? Is it warm? Is it cold? And it makes them be like, I don't know, is it? And they'll squish their finger into it. And so instead of going, try it, it's just a different question. So that's kind of on one hand, which is always put something on their plate that they're not so sure about, but just keep trying, just keep doing it, keep changing it, keep putting it on there, because eventually they will touch it and then we all go, hurrah, and then they get the positive feedback rather than the negative feedback. Where it comes to hiding food, I 100% agree. I do need to get some nutrients into her. So the places that I do hide food is in smoothies. Again, I can use things like organic berry powder, which means she's getting antioxidants and colour. I can put avocado in, which means that she's getting fats. I can put nuts and seeds in as long as there's no allergies. So it means she's getting, again, the proteins, the nutrients from it and the fats. And then anything like spinach, you can get in, you're getting greenery. It's amazing. You can also freeze them. So if you would like, I've already, for example, cooked some sweet potatoes the night before and you just scoop out the middle part, you can put that into a smoothie mixture, but then freeze it in a lollipop mold. And again, most children really like the fruit pouches, which you just sort of suck out because it's all really fun. So I've bought some of the pouches and they're like silicone pouches, and I've made the concept of what she thinks is a smoothie pouch. But it's me, and I've done organic sweet potato mushed up, and I've done the organic carrot because she won't touch carrot unless it's spiralized and turned into a wiggly worm, and then she finds it really fun. So you can basically do anything, and you can freeze it, you can smoothie it. And the other options are always trying to go, if you're making a lasagna or a bolognese, for example, you blend up the vegetables and make them really small so they can't find them and they can't see them. And it's just in the passata sauce, meaning they're getting herbs, they're getting ginger, they're getting garlic, they're all anti-inflammatory, they're getting red, they're getting orange, they're getting, onions, they're getting all the different types of colour that you would want them to eat, but they don't know they're eating it.
Oh, do you know what's amazing is I'm sitting here listening to you going, I am so grateful that you guys have been working with me for the time that you have, because I realise that I do a lot of this naturally now. But I also hear that if somebody's listening, they're going, God, on top of being a busy working mum, this sounds like even more. And you've taught me some great ways of doing this in terms of one of the things that I now do is I have a veg box delivered once a week. And it can be the wonky veg. It doesn't have to be kind of, an expensive one, because they choose the veg for you almost. So like last week I had aubergine, courgette, asparagus, and those aren't typically things that I would pick up in my shop. One of the things it does make me do is I have to think a little bit more about, okay, so how am I going to use these so they don't go to waste? But I batch cooks over a weekend. The only way I can feed my family healthy food across a week is to batch cook, because if I wait until the evening to cook, I can have all the food in, but I'm tired. I haven't got the brain power or capacity to think. So the weekend I made a massive vat of slow roasted veg with passata and blended it up, and we're having that tonight, pasta sauce. So all I've got to do is cook the pasta and add it in, and that's me done. And I tried it a few weeks ago because my kids typically wouldn't choose to eat an aubergine or courgette. And I absolutely get what you're saying is about introducing them, because my daughter will look at a courgette and think it's a cucumber. So I think it's really important that she knows the difference, because they are quite similar. So this is a courgette, but and they loved that pasta sauce. So I'm now really grateful, because as you say, they're getting garlic in there, they're getting all of that mix of veg, and they love it.
And they love it, and they don't necessarily know it.
Yeah. And I will freeze half of that. And so it's being smart in terms of doing it. And smoothies for us are the easiest way for us to, my kids love making them with me. So again, they're getting to love and handle and know the food and appreciate what's going into them. But yeah, that's juices and smoothies are big in our house.
I think it starts. The other thing is, I even get my 18-month-old to help me unpack the shopping, and she's like, "Ooh, what's this?" And I get her pepper, and she'll literally just go and
yes, mine does. I used to call her a little caterpillar. She would go through the fridge and take bites out my peppers and put them back.
And I kind of don't mind. Obviously, I always make sure it's washed, but I don't. I think that's a really good way of her going, I don't know what that is. I'll put it in my mouth. Yeah, fair enough. It's a mushroom. Yeah, I'm not so sure. Out it comes. That's fine. It's a carrot. Yeah, I like that. It's fine. So I always think just start the whole process of, I don't know, can you grow can you grow one tomato plant in your garden which your kid can water, and then they go, wow, there's a tomato on that. That's amazing. Bite it. Ooh, it's a very different thought process for a child to watch a tomato grow than it is just to pull one out the packet. And I know we are all busy mamas, but like on the weekend I went to a garden centre and I went, actually, my kiddo loves to water things, makes her be outside. She's got her fingers in the mud. She's going to grow a tomato and she's going to know where it came from, rather than it just comes from a packet.
And that's an important piece, actually, you say there about fingers in mud, because as we said right at the beginning, both of my children were born by C-section. And I remember speaking to a mum who's actually been on this podcast. She's got 4 children, and one of her children has got like life-threatening allergies. And she got really curious about that. Like, I've had 4 kids, why this one? And that was the one that was born by C-section, and it's taken her down. And she's actually, she's an NCT teacher by background. So she now works with midwives to educate them on layering baby microbiome. And I remember saying to her, well, I can't change the fact that my child was born by C-section. What can I do instead? And I remember her saying to me, live on a farm if you can, have a dog and let them play in mud. So what is it about those that actually help the microbiome?
It's coming across all the different types of bacteria that you're going to come across that are not going to harm us, as long as we are obviously washing our hands before we then go, I'm going to go and eat my food. So there's quite a fine line between yes, live on a farm. Yes, do put your fingers in the mud, because you are basically coming across bacteria that your body's trying to do that thing that we said right at the start, which is, are you a friend or are you a foe? Do I need to fight you or don't I? And it's like, actually, I don't love you. I don't want you in me. So I'm going to fight you if you come into me, but I'm all right because you've put me on the outside of you. And it's helping me just to understand good and bad. So that is, there is absolute research out there which says, a dog can be incredible for your child's microbiome, but you do have to be careful to go, but I equally don't want you running in their poop. So there's always this balance of, we aren't cave women anymore. We are in this world, which is, we have a different area or a different way of our bodies interacting with the environment, because in caveman time we didn't have toxins, pesticides, antibiotics and things that were disrupting our immune system. We only had the bacteria that might be in the soil to deal with, and that's where we've got to be a little bit careful with rolling around in mud and kind of expecting ourselves to be totally fine with it if we were to eat it, versus I've had some kids who, yes, they grow up on a farm or they visit a farm and actually they get parasites because they aren't used to it and their body isn't aware of how to fight. So it's everything in moderation, like everything in moderation, and being aware of what also could be in that soil or what could also be sprayed all over that plant, for example.
You've just said a couple of things that are kind of really important that I want to explore, and I'm just in my head going, which one should we go with first? So you talked about parasites there, and as you know, probably from my family history, that's something that my children have had to work on. So just for kind of people listening, my son was born with a hole in his heart, and we were under a pediatric consultant for a number of years, and we used to see them regularly. And I remember when he was about 18 months old, going to this pediatric consultant and saying, his stools are really, really loose, but he was my first child. I was breastfeeding and I didn't know what was normal. And they just said, well, we'll test him for celiac because he actually is presenting as somebody that could have it, because apparently it's a Northern European. And so if you're pale skin and blonde hair, you're more likely to be predisposed to it. So they tested him for that and it came back negative. And they diagnosed him with toddler diarrhea. And at 18 months old, I was like, okay, went back 6 months later and he was 2. And I was like, I'm trying to potty train and his stools are so loose, it's really stopping us. And they were like, oh, it's that toddler diarrhea, and gave me a leaflet. And I remember looking at the leaflet and going, well, what age will he grow out of it? And they kind of went, probably by the age of 5. And I remember thinking, well, that's not going to be good if he's at school with and he's not potty trained. And I came to you at Embracing Nutrition and just went, this doesn't seem right.
And my favorite word came out, why?
Yeah. And you said, let's do a stool analysis. And he came back with a parasite. And literally you gave me some tinctures that I put into water. And within a week, his stools were solid and he was out of his nappies day and night within a week. And I remember going, like, you guys are just like, you're magic. Like, I need you supporting my family. Like, this is just incredible. And I went back to the pediatric consultant with the name of the parasite and was like, this is what you need to know. And she even said, she was like, thank you. She said, I will feed this back to the medical board. She said, but we don't test for it because we don't know what to do with it. And she said, in years to come, we will know from a rheumatoid arthritis, like all of this perspective, we have missed so much. So that's the kind of work that you do. You really get forensic with this stuff. So what might how would somebody know that their child has got a parasite? Because I didn't. And I would say that I was probably more au fait with this kind of stuff than most people. And how do you work with people? So what might somebody do if they've got that and suspicion something else is going on?
Do you know, parasites are interesting, actually. Sometimes they can make a really big difference getting rid of them, and sometimes they don't. They can be a bit of are they like one of those things that you go, might work, might not work. But I mean, because what we often see is parasites come quite hand in hand with some bad bacteria in the gut and some possible fungal overgrowth and a possible leaky gut, etc. So there's some things that parasites can come along hand in hand with. But if we just think about from a parasite perspective, again, back in caveman era, actually, honestly, they all probably had parasites, and it actually assisted them to have an immune system which understood what was going on in the world. But again, because we've got a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of that and a bit of that, plus antibiotics, plus pesticides, plus toxins, plus our gut and our body can't cope with it. So it might be, in your case particularly, where you go, actually, that parasite made a massive difference. How you know you've got a parasite particularly is actually quite tricky. Some people can say they have an itchy bum. They could watch their children be quite itchy. And what we often find with even just like the sort of simple tapeworm that kiddos get a lot in nurseries and schools is that you'll often find that they're kind of, I'm itching and I'm uncomfortable. That's quite a giveaway sign. And other symptoms can be really random. There's one that your child can, in theory, their behavior can get worse on a full moon, which I know that sounds really kooky, but I've heard it a lot where people have said, my child, they change on a full moon. And it's because parasites can, in theory, become more active at that point. So that's something just to watch. Is your child's behavior or immune system or something dysregulated more cyclically for you to monitor and go, what is that cycle?
And I think it's important for people listening that if they were to come and work with you, these are the type of questions you're asking, aren't you? You ask like the most in-depth questions. Have you ever been around lead or mercury, or like you want to know everything?
And what I always say about what we do, I will never test something if I don't have a kit bag for it. The reason the medical model, the NHS, etc., don't often test is because they don't have the kit bag currently to do much with it. And it's not because they don't care. It's not because like they don't necessarily, well, sometimes they don't understand it fully because they're not trained in that line particularly. But I often say if they don't have a kit bag for it, they won't test. Whereas if I find a parasite, I will test, and it won't be antibiotics. It will be a natural tincture. It'll be a natural, if it's a bacteria, it'll be like an antibacterial, but it's natural and it's from plants originally. And if it's a fungal overgrowth, again, we can do natural antifungal kill off. So all of the things I might find if we were to do a stool test, we've always got a kit bag full of.
Now, interesting, you've mentioned antifungal a couple of times. What might somebody be presenting with that would be the kind of underlying cause?
Now, fungal is interesting. So fungal symptoms in a woman can be more like I get like thrush all the time, for example. In a baby, you might be getting thrush in their mouth, but that could be just the situation that they're in as a tiddly tot, breastfeeding, etc. But as a child, what I often find is if I've got a neurodivergent child, so their behavior is neurodivergent, I will again always look at the gut. And 99.999% of my children with autism or ADHD or Asperger's or something neurodivergent have got some form of fungal overgrowth in their gut, because I'll know it effectively because of their behavior. So not because of their gut symptoms. And this is what's tricky, is that we kind of have to look. What's your behavior and what's your gut doing? But what's that interacting with that? And what's that doing to that? And what's the spider diagram of the big picture? So this is where I'll gather all the information. I'll create a spider diagram and think, right, that's where it's coming from. We'll test if we can test, because you can then get definitive answers. But the type of behavior that I've seen in children who have got fungal overgrowth is the fungal overgrowth is a neurotoxin, meaning toxic to your brain. So they give off a toxin and it goes through your blood and it goes through your brain, and your brain then gets, the way your brain works can change. And I've had children who are autistic and almost not able to go to school, scratching, biting, can't sit still, climbing up the walls. And within 4 weeks of doing a fungal kill off, they're sitting still and they're getting some words and they're communicating and they're not biting. And like those, things are life-changing. If a child can't sit still and can't even go to school, and a mum can't then go to work, or a mum can't do the things that mum needs to do because they've got to sit at home with their child, who is really challenging, actually, that's life-affecting. To be able to go, my child isn't poo smearing, my child can sit on the toilet, my child can go to school, my child can sit still, my child is happy in their space, in their head. And that could just be from fungal overgrowth.
And as you were saying all of that, I was like getting tingles up my spine about how powerful this is. So just got a couple of questions left. And we've actually said, haven't we, that if people are interested, we could do an episode specifically on kind of that whole area of neurodiversity and what we can be doing from a kind of nutritional functional perspective. So if people are interested, please message and we will kind of absolutely look at doing that if that's useful.
And we haven't even talked about the autoimmune side of immune system either. So we could do a whole new section on that as well.
Okay, brilliant. Oh, I love this. So I'm intrigued about, obviously, your personal experience and then with the work that you do. How do you think that's changed you and how you parent and the things that you would do in your home, for example?
Oh, it's 100% changed how I parent. In my old life, which I always say is like before functional medicine, I wouldn't have known. And this is where it's like there is never any judgment coming from me, because I've changed who I am through functional medicine. So if someone comes to me, they're often like, oh no, I know, I feel so bad, like I'm feeding them gluten, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm like, yeah, but don't feel bad, because you don't know these things. And I didn't know these things. But the way that I now parent is very much sort of what we've talked about from a food, and hear me when I'm like, I've got a picky child already. And that's because toddlers want to say no and, you know, push boundaries, and they don't love certain things. That's fine. And I hear that. But the way that I work is I'm very careful about what goes in her. I'm very careful about what goes on her. And I'm careful about what surrounds her. She's got my genetics, as in, you know, she's got the potential. I've got autoimmunity, so she's got the potential for autoimmunity. I actually ran her genetic. You can do by Life Code GX, you can do a genetic panel, and I did it on her because I was like, do you know what? I need her manual. I need to understand her genetics, how her genes interact with the environments, which is what we call genomics, for me to know how to manage her. Which is actually, she shouldn't have gluten because she's got my genetic potential for celiac disease. I don't want to switch that on. So I'm like, she doesn't have gluten in her diet. She just doesn't. And I will generally aim for her not to, because I don't want to switch anything on. I will always say she needs higher levels of fish oils. I'll always go down the route of I'll always give her some probiotics. She'll always have kefir in her food somehow. She'll always have different types of fiber, whether it's in her smoothies. She'll always have colour and antioxidants, but I have to work really hard to get it in there, and I have to come up with different ways, and it is hard. And what I would say is try and get a bunch of girls, parents, mums, dads, whoever it is, and almost like start a WhatsApp feed to be like, who's got a good idea of how the hoo-ha to get some spinach into their kids? And my friend will send me a link to, and like she does eat gluten, so she'll send me a link to, hey, I've tried these spinach muffins. And he loves it. And I'll just go, that's amazing. I'll switch mine into almond flour instead, the gluten flour, and then we've got a different recipe. So pull together, ask your pals who's doing what, or each one make a different type of muffin, and then you can share them at the next time you see each other, but help each other, because it is hard brain-wise to always be coming up with a recipe every single week with something different in it.
And it's also, there are some brilliant people out there on social media, like the whole Deliciously Ella, because she's all of her kind of foods, and, you know, there's loads of areas of inspiration. And you talk there about what you put on her. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So everything from whether it's cream that's going on her bottom, or whether it's the nappies I use, or whether it's the washing powder, I'll always aim for like organic vests that are going near her, because it's really, honestly, it's terrifying. Part of me goes, I wish I didn't know it, but I do. So then I'm like, no, let's share the information. But even when you look at things like kids' pajamas, they have got horrendous amounts of flame retardants and toxins on them, and things like anti-crease toxins. Like, who cares that your jammies are creased? So if we look at what is sprayed onto our children's clothes, I think she's going to be breathing those in. Our children are sucking in toxins morning, noon, and night if we're not aware of some of the toxins that are on their clothes.
So where would you choose to get your clothes from then? Are there particular brands?
Yeah,
or...
so I mean, even if you just type it, so Frugi and Kite are all organic. Even H&M is a really good way of getting, there's something like 87% organic cotton.
I never knew that.
Yeah, so have a look at the H&M website, because again, H&M's pretty reasonable. Some of the other organic cotton, like, you know, Kites and Frugis are expensive, but honestly, if you just go, I'm going to go in the sale, I'm going to buy them organic clothes. When it comes up for the next season, you'll do better than buying it them when they're full price. But I generally go organic clothes, at least if it's her vest and her sleep sacks. I'm really careful about her sleep sacks and her mattress, because again, your face is right up against your mattress. So I've got a wool mattress that's not got any nasties in it. So it's more just not to stress mums out, to go, oh my God, my child's surrounded by toxins. But if you're going to buy something new because they need it, like new pajamas, look for an organic cotton blended one. And if they're going to be, for example, if you're doing their bedroom up and it's, you know, going to have a new carpet, again, just look for more like an 80% wool carpet. If you're going to put curtains up or they're new and something's coming out of a packet, I always put it nowhere near anyone, and the packet is opened outside and it's put through the wash. And this is where, if you can wash your children's clothes 3 times over before it goes anywhere near them, they're not going to be breathing in those things.
Ah, interesting. And what washing powder do you choose to use?
So I use an aloe vera washing powder. I can send you the link to it. It's actually just on Amazon.
Okay.
But again, there's nothing grotty in it. And any cream, I just go onto Natural Dispensary, like calendula cream for bottom, nappy change cream. There's a really nice one. And my kiddo's never, ever, ever had nappy rash. And I swear to God, it's because she uses bamboo nappies or reusable cotton ones. So she's never had a problem, ever. Because I think that the toxins that, again, are in the, I won't say any brands, but like some of the less natural brands, when we interacts with whatever's in it, it can create quite a lot of toxins which are sitting against your skin for quite a while. So I feel, having talked to a lot of my other friends who don't necessarily understand what I do from an organic and natural perspective, their children are often at the GPs, they're often taking antibiotics, they're often needing, really quite strong creams for nappy rashes and eczema, and I could just be really lucky, or it could be that actually what we're putting on is not filling up her bucket. And I always say this, every child has a bucket, obviously an invisible bucket, but the concept of a bucket, which is people can only deal with so many toxins and everyone's ability to detoxify is different. So if you fill up that bucket with what we can't really help, which is the fumes from cars and planes and paint and carpets, and then you add in the toxins from your clothes, and then you add in the toxins from the sprays from the foods and the herbs that we eat, and then you add in a bit more from something else, your toxic bucket is getting full, and it can then create quite a problem on whether it's your immune system or your brain and how that works. But there's always going to be, everyone is different, and I never want to fill my child's bucket up.
Yeah, and I love that. And thank you for sharing those, because, again, that's a huge education process I've gone through. You talked about the genetic testing. I've learned that I have a methylation issue, which means that impacts my ability to detoxify. And therefore, I have to pay attention to these things. And the chances are, as you say, my daughter's got my genetics. I can trace, I think that's my mum's genetic line, and it opens up this, I'm a lot more careful now about, I love lighting candles, but I now, again, through what you've kind of educated me, I'm really careful about the candles that I choose, because even something as simple as that is adding toxins in if you're not careful. So thank you. That's great to get those insights. So we've covered so much, but if there was just one thing that you want somebody listening to this episode to take away from what you've said, what would you want that to be?
I think it would be, don't stress, but look, almost like what I've just said, look at what's going in, look at what's around them, and is there anything that you can change over time, bit by bit, that makes that a more healthy place to be? Because our genetic, what we call genomics, what our genes are interacting with, is the thing which could cause the immune system dysregulation or the neurodivergence or the something that's happening to our children. I don't know about you, but I will do anything and everything I can to protect my child and make them happy and well. And if you can look at what's around them and look at what's going in them, you've got a hope and hell's chance of keeping them safe, or as safe as we possibly can. So just open eyes, I think, and just say, is there anything I can do which does do what we've talked about, put more colour in, put more goodness in, take out or reduce the load of the not so good, to see whether we can get them in a better balance.
Thank you. You shared so much wisdom there. Love it. So how can people find out more about you, your work? Where would you point them to?
So you can email me directly, lottie@embracingnutrition.co.uk. If you go on our website, it's www.embracingnutrition.co.uk. And you can ask for a discovery call. So if you go, I want some information, I don't know whether I want to book yet, can you talk to me more specifically? Just click the link and you can get a 15-minute discovery call with me. And you just say, this is the problem. Do you think you can help? Tell me a bit more before you can book. You can book straight online. All the diary's online, and you can just get straight in, click on me. There's lots of different practitioners on there. I'm generally the person that works with children and autoimmunity. And you can follow us on Instagram. So again, you just get little snippets. If you go on Instagram, you can follow us on there. I think we're on Facebook. So we're everywhere.
And I would highly recommend you do regular Facebook, Instagram lives where you will dive deep into a particular area. And they're always like so much goodness in those. You share so much of your wisdom so freely as well. So Thank you, Lottie. I really appreciate you joining me. And thank you for everything you've done for my family as well.
My pleasure. It was lovely to see you.
And you. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too. So if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.